with you today. I am excited to delve into the material today because we're really going to be discovering this together. We're going to be moving through this material together, and I'm excited about the questions that you have and the things that you want to talk about. And we're going to get a chance to put some of these ideas into practice today, which I think could be a lot of fun, but also really helpful as far as how we apply these ideas. For those of you who haven't got a chance to meet me yet, my name is John Bucher. I'm a PCC certified coach. I have a PhD in mythology and depth psychology. I do a lot of story consulting in Hollywood. And I have a deep passion for story because I believe that no matter who we are or what we're trying to do, there is a better story out there waiting for every single person in the world. And I'm excited to play a role in that and to help facilitate that for individuals, organizations, even countries. So we'll be bringing those ideas in more as we move through things. Today, what we have on the agenda is I'm going to just give a couple of brief tips for you in using storytelling in your coaching. And as I give those tips, please feel free to jump in with questions and we can talk about those. And then we're going to move into actually letting you try some of these things out with each other in breakouts. And then we'll come back together and we'll kind of talk about how that went and unpack those things. But what I'd like to do just right off the bat today, I really was enjoying in the chat hearing how some of you are using story in your work with clients. I'd ask you to be thinking about that. And for those of you who didn't get a chance to share, I'd encourage you to keep thinking about it. Be thinking about, if the way you use story is intentional or unintentional. Think about whether you use it consciously or maybe even just unconsciously. It just comes out. But the question that I'd like to pose to you, and I'd love to invite just, one or two of you in that might want to come on camera and share your answer for this is, what types of stories do you tend to hear over and again in your coaching practice? Are there certain types of stories that just, no matter who the client is, they seem to come up, certain types of themes, certain elements of storytelling? Anyone open to share what they find, comes up time and time again in their coaching practice? I see that hand, Wendy. Please jump in. Yes.
I don't know if this is a story per se, but boy, do I hear the phrase imposter syndrome all the time.
Wendy.
And it feels like that's something that's in the zeitgeist. I know the phrase was coined in the late 70s, but it just feels like it's so out there right now.
Wendy, I am so glad you brought this in. Wendy, the imposter syndrome story is something I hear from clients all the time. Everyone feels like today's the day. Today's the day I'm going to get found out, and they're all going to know that I don't really know what I'm talking about, or I shouldn't be here. They're going to find out I'm a fraud. Today's the day, right? That imposter syndrome that we somehow don't deserve to be doing what we're doing, that we somehow don't, that we're fake, we're fraud. And, Wendy, that story, it's such an important story, I think, to work with in coaching because it speaks to a place of lack within a client. It speaks to a place of insecurity where we feel like what we have is not enough. It speaks to scarcity. But you may have heard before about, there's a scarcity mentality of I never quite have enough. And then there's this mentality of abundance that what I have is enough. And I find so often that scarcity mentality is just something that plagues so many clients, that what I have is just not good enough. I always need more certifications. I always need more, affirmations. And even we as coaches, can feel that way ourselves. but I have so many clients that they tell me that same story, Wendy, is I'm an imposter, I'm not good enough, and today's the day I'm going to be found out. I'm so glad you brought that story in for us today. Anyone else have a story that they tend to hear over and over in their work with clients? Jay, I see that hand. What story do you hear over and over?
If it only weren't for that person or this situation, then I would be able to.
Jay, I'm laughing because, man, if I had a nickel for every time I've heard that story, if it only weren't for that person or that situation or that thing, then life would be perfect. Life would be excellent. My job would be ideal. My relationship would be ideal. If it weren't for that particular person, I would actually be recognized in the office as the person that I want to be. I would have the job that I want. It's always something, right, Jay?
Nailed it.
Yeah, it's so true, Jay. And you know, what I've found, and Jay, tell me if this is true for you, what I've found is even sometimes when that person that stands in the way is removed, that person retires or quits, then something else quickly takes its place because there's always something in the way of that person's progress. Have you found that to be the case, Jay?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say that you are directly and positively responsible for me being able to, from part one, identify returning characters, whether they be different individuals, but the character is really a block or a frustration or an emotion. And that was so richly valuable, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that so much. I love what Wendy is saying here in the chat, that, you know, the person who tells that person has a victim, a saboteur voice is in the driver's seat. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work of Brené Brown. I love Brené Brown so much. And she has this anecdote that she says that she often has fear wants to come in and, you know, play that imposter with her, or that sabotages her. And she has something she always says to fear. She says, "Fear, you have kept me safe in so many situations in life. Thank you. I value you. This is not one of those situations I need you, but you're welcome to ride with me in the car, but you don't get to drive the car, and you don't get to work the radio, because that's for me." And I love that Brené Brown says that, because I think that is a reality of client work. Is it's not like that fear or that saboteur voice goes away necessarily. And psychologists will tell us trying to shame that voice or push it away, it's just not a healthy way to deal with it. We have to find ways to welcome that voice in, and to have relationship with it, and to deal with it in ways that we can move into health. Jay, I'm so glad you brought this story in, because you know, it's easy for me to see that in my own client work, but it's also easy for me to see that in my own work, in my own life. I find myself often saying, you know, if it weren't for this, I would be doing the type of coaching I want to do. Jay, does that ever happen to you?
Never. It never has ever happened before in my entire life. I'm just blessed.
Oh, Jay, I'm so glad to hear it. I'm so glad to hear there's one of us out there. So good. So good. Well, what I'd like to do now is I'd like to move into, you know, some thoughts for you, just a few tips before we get into these breakout sessions. And I'm going to share my screen again, because it just sort of helps keep us on track to what we're talking about. The first thing I'd like to share with you, just a couple of tips. I'd like to share with you 3 ways to use story to go quick, to go deep with a client quickly. Now, that's a bit of a tongue twister, so I'm going to say it again because I messed it up there. 3 ways to use story to go deep with a client. So the first tip that I'd like to give you here is a question that often I will ask a client at the beginning of a session, especially repeat clients that don't always know what they want to talk about. One of the first things I often ask is I will say, tell me about the best moment of your week. This question will lead to a story. They will tell you a story automatically about the best moment of their week. What's great about that is it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be some massive thing that happened. It may just say, well, my daughter Sally, she doesn't always get good grades, but she got a B on her math quiz, and oh, it was just a great moment this week. And she will tell you this story about her daughter Sally, and it automatically opens up the session to say, tell me about your relationship with Sally. You can quickly go deep into things just by asking about the best moment of someone's week. And here's the thing, I've never had a client that didn't have an answer to that. You're not asking about the best moment of their life or if something amazing happened, just what's something good that happened this week. It automatically opens up a story. Number two, the second thing that is a way to go deep with clients fairly quickly, what happened yesterday in your world? It invites them to tell a story of how they got to where they're sitting right now with you. We're not asking them to tell their whole life story. We're asking just what happened yesterday. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, the clients I ask this of will say, well, yesterday wasn't really, nothing much happened yesterday, but here's what happened. And they will tell you the story. And there's something that happened in their day that almost always opens up where they're at right now. Because we are impacted by the moments that happen to us throughout our day. It often is the case. I will have a client sit down and they will tell me, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a little frazzled. I had a crazy morning. Oh, tell me the story of that crazy morning. What happened this morning? What led you to where you're sitting right now here with me? It's just a wonderful way to quickly go deep, is inviting a story. So as a reminder, the number one way to go deep, tell me about the best moment of your week. Number two, what happened yesterday or this morning in your world? And number three, what are you proud to have accomplished this week or this month or this year? Whatever, you'll know your client best. But I like asking them, what are you proud to have accomplished this week? Now, again, I'll warn you, almost every client will immediately shrug at the question and say, well, nothing really much happened this week. But then when they start to think about it and they think about what they did accomplish this week, something always comes up. You know, I've been meaning to clean out the garage, and last Thursday I actually did it. I guess I'm kind of proud of that. I'm glad that, that's probably, I'm proud of that. There's always something that comes up. There's something in human psychology that we want to be proud of ourselves. We want to recognize what we're capable of and what we've accomplished. I love, Kayla here says, sounds like a great way for clients to take stock of their life, their week, their day. That's exactly it. And Kayla, what I love to do is to invite them to do that through story. Tell me the story of that. And it doesn't have to be a big, expansive story, but just tell me the story. Okay, so those are our 3 ways to go deep with a client fairly quickly. Tell me about the best moment of your week, what happened to you yesterday, and what are you proud to have accomplished this week. I want to move to the next set of 3 tips here. You notice I have 3 sets of 3s. I just love the number 3. I don't know why, but I love the number 3. So the next set of 3s are 3 ways to turn stories into powerful questions. We know as coaches, our biggest currency is powerful questions. This is what we use to help clients explore what is inside of them and find the answers inside of them that they are looking for. So 3 ways to turn stories into questions. Number one, I often ask, once a client has told any story, what could have made that a better story for you? What could have made that a better story for you? What could have happened in that story that would make it a better story in your life? It doesn't have to be this big, expansive answer. It may be, let's take the cleaning out of the garage. I've asked a client this before, is what would have made that a better story? And do you know what that client told me? She said, well, it would have been a better story if I had cleaned out the garage 3 weeks ago. Well, tell me about the things that kept you from cleaning out the garage for 3 weeks. All of a sudden, we're in this deep coaching session, right? And this is just in a few seconds, right? Because these stories open up our experiences in life. So this is the first question I often ask after a story. What could have made that a better story for you? Question number two, I often will look to reference a client's body language when they tell a story and watch for the moment their eyes light up, or they begin to use their hands, or their energy shifts. Of course, we know as ICF coaches, this is a marker that we should be looking for, right? This is a marker that ICF coaches need to be paying attention to and looking for. So this is something that easily connects with what we need to be doing anyway. Watching the client's body language when they tell a story. What's the moment their eyes get big? What's the moment they shift in their chair? What's the moment their hands come up? What's the moment their feet start tapping? What's the moment their smile changes? Watching for that moment and then saying, hey, I noticed when you told this part of the story, when you got to this part in the story, your eyes lit up. What happened there? Tell me about that. It opens up a perfect coaching opportunity. So number one, what could have made that a better story for you? Number two, to reference the client's body language changes in their story. And number three, and this can be a tough one, would everyone involved in that story you just told me tell the story the same way? What this can do, especially when it's a story that involves other people, is it begins to allow us to consider situations from other people's perspectives. In other words, Janet, that you were saying ruined your day, what would this story be like from Janet's perspective? How would Janet tell that story? And sometimes just having a client actually tell you the story from Janet's perspective, it really opens up some very deep thematic issues that client may be dealing with that they want to explore in your coaching session. It also allows us to increase the building of empathy in our work with clients. And empathy is such a powerful tool for coaches. As a coach, when I'm able to recognize that building empathy with a client and having them see the world and their worldview from other perspectives, we start to do more complex work together in our coaching scenarios, and we start to go deeper in our work together. So as a quick review, number one, what could have made that a better story for you? Number two, to reference the client's body language in as it changes in the story. And number three, would everyone involved in that story tell it the same way? We're going to move to the next, the last little group of three here before I invite you into telling some stories of your own today. And the last group of three, I'm going to give you all in one bite here. And it's 3 ways to interpret a client's story. And these are basically 3 things to listen for in a client's story. 1, listen for the protagonist or the hero of the story. Is the client the hero in the story they're telling? Is their child the hero in the story they're telling? Is their boss or someone at work the hero in the story they're telling? Listen for who the protagonist or the hero is in the story. And look for questions that can unpack that choice of who they chose to be the hero in the story. Number two, listen for the conflict in the story. We said last week that stories are built on conflict. Good stories have conflict in them. And ask the client about what the true nature of the conflict is. Is the conflict that Judy is just a really annoying person to deal with? Or is the conflict that Judy got a promotion when I didn't? What's the true nature of the conflict? And number three, listen for the theme of the story. What is the theme of the story? I have a client that is always telling me stories that deal with father-son issues. And one day I asked my client, I said, would you like to talk about your son? And he got sat straight up in his chair and he said, it's difficult for me to talk about, but I think I should talk about my relationship with my son. How did you know? I said, I've noticed that the theme of so many of your stories you tell me, even though they have nothing to do with your son, the theme in so many of these stories are father-son issues. So listening for the theme in your client's story may allow you the opportunity to ask a question. I should also say, as a coach, sometimes I've identified a theme and I've asked the client about it and they've said, no, John, that's not at all what I'm dealing with, or not at all what I want to talk about. And you know what? That's okay. Because we are there to serve the client and where they're wanting to go with it. Maybe the client didn't want to talk about it, or maybe I was just off the mark. That happens sometimes too, and that's okay. We have to be okay with the fact that we're not going to be perfect. You know, we're all kind of stumbling around in the dark here, right? Well, just as a quick review before we move here to the breakouts, 3 ways to interpret a client's story. 1, listen for the protagonist. 2, listen for the conflict. And 3, listen for the theme.
John, we have a question.
Yes.
What is the difference really between conflict and theme?
Ooh, I love this question. What a rich question. So the conflict in a story is going to be usually what causes some sort of negative emotion. Usually conflict is something that we try and either avoid or that we grit our teeth and deal with it, but the conflict usually will bring up some sort of negative emotion. The theme usually refers to the lesson or the end of the story, what we learn from the client's story. So for example, in this with this client that I was working with that had these father-son issues he wanted to deal with, the conflict was that he couldn't figure out a way to communicate with his son. The theme in all his stories were that fathers and sons should get along and be able to love each other. So the theme is usually not going to be something that rises negative emotions. Usually the theme raises positive emotions. It raises things that we believe, where the conflict is usually rising some sort of negative emotion there. What a great question. So good. So good. Okay, here's what we're going to do now. Now, I recognize we only have a limited amount of time, so we're not going to have time to go through full coaching sessions with each other when we go into breakouts. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to cheat just a little bit, and we're going to assume that a coaching session is already happening, and I have a prompt for you that I'm going to invite you to use in order to get into stories quickly. Here's the way it's going to work. we're going to invite you into groups of 3 in these breakouts. And we've chosen 3 in case someone really doesn't want to participate. You can just put into the chat with your group. I'd rather just listen, but we're hoping at least 2 of the 3 of you, and maybe all 3 of you, would like to participate. And what we'd like to do is this. I'm going to share my screen sort of as the template for your time. What we'd like to do is this. We'd like you to take just 1 minute for everybody to quickly introduce themselves. Don't give that more than 1 minute. So if there's 3 of you in the group, that's about 20 seconds each, just to quickly introduce yourself. And then one of you should be willing to act as the client, and one of you should be willing to act as the coach, and one of you as the observer. Now, if you have time, you may want to switch these roles up, but let's just start with one person being the client, one person being the coach, and one person being the observer that's going to observe both the coach and the client. So take about 2 minutes for the client to tell their story and respond to this prompt. And I've put the prompt up here. It's raining today. Now, we all know, living in Southern California, if it was raining, we would talk about it, because that is a rare occurrence in Southern California. So we're going to pretend it's raining today. And the prompt that the coach is going to ask the client is, what does the rain bring up for you? Is there a story from your life involving rain that you can think of? And from there, the client is going to share for 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes of anything that comes up for them, and then about 2 minutes of coaching. So coach, you're going to be able to then ask questions and do coaching based on that story, and try and keep in mind some of the principles that we've learned thus far. So any questions before we jump into these breakouts? We've put the prompt in the chat. Any questions? If not, I'm going to invite the leadership here to go ahead and take us into the breakouts. We're going to be in the breakouts for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. And then we'll come back in here and we will reflect, and I'll answer some questions, and we'll talk about what happened in your breakouts. So I'll see you back in 6 minutes.
Give me 1 moment, please.
No worries.
Because
no worries.
I had a few people, looks like, drop off. So I'm going to move a couple of people. So we still have 3 people to a room. John, did you want to be in a room?
I would be happy to be in a room.
Okay, then I will leave you in a room 5. And I know there's, 1 person who is not going to be in a room, but I couldn't get you out. So just don't accept the opening of the rooms. And I think we're ready to go. Okay.
All right, let's go.
I'll be here waiting for you all. So
We'll
6
see you in
minutes,
6
you said,
minutes.
right, John?
6 minutes, yes.
Okay, here you go. I think you all need to accept. Whoever would like to join, accept. Petra, are you going to join?
Yes, I am.
Oh, Victoria, okay. Yeah, we have a few more people. Lisa, Peggy.
We have 1 unassigned. That may be Karen, who just
Oh yeah,
returned.
Karen just joined. So assigned to
We got to leave this room intact a little longer, Nanoa, because some now start a little later, right?
yeah, I added
Oh,
okay, so I'm gonna go to Carol Schultz's room. She's asking a question. Oh, definitely, go for it, Gloria. Okay, Peggy. Okay, I'll be right back, I think. I hope I can come back. Are you staying here, Petra? Oh, wait, let me pause. Hold on, the recording. Here, I'm gonna restart. You guys were having way too much fun. Nobody wanted to leave the room.
I had the same, experience where I feel like no matter how long a breakout session is, it's right in that last minute where things just are really like, oh, it can't be over. We got to stay. Always
Yeah.
so. Oh,
Oh,
I
so
am
fun.
blown away. Just I was privileged to be in a group with two of you that I was just blown away at how quickly the powerful coaching just came out of the story. I would love to hear what happened in your breakout groups. Would anyone be willing to share what happened? All right, while we're waiting on someone to volunteer, I'm going to ask the two people that were in my breakout group if we might have permission to share what happened. So Victoria and Kayla, could I have your permission to share? Okay, I see that thumbs up. Kayla, Victoria, would that be okay? Well, Victoria may, I tell you what, we won't share Victoria's side of it just yet, but
Okay.
Kayla, would it be okay if we share your insights? Kayla, could I invite you you had some really powerful insights about yourself. Kayla was the client in our session, and Kayla, you had some really powerful insights about how you saw rain. And sort of what that brought up to you and the difference of lenses that you held for different people. Would you be open to sharing your insights there? Oh, I think you're still muted, Kayla.
Oops.
Hear you.
Oh, yeah, now we can.
Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. I didn't hear the last few things you said, John, but I
That's
can.
okay.
Yeah. So for me, I saw actually rain with different eyes after I had a situation that my daughter asked me a question. We came to a wedding and it was raining that day, and I was complaining about it and saying how perfect would be if it was going to be sunny. And she said, "Well, Mom, the the way of perfection that it is for you, it's not for everybody. Not everybody likes sun," which is true. And that me made realize that sometimes I impose in other people my way of perfection or what I think is right? And that was my little story. And from there, Victoria just took over and helped me, and we had a little bit of a brief coaching conversation. And John was watching. It was really interesting because I didn't stop to really think about that until this moment.
Victoria, are you with us now?
I am with you now. Sorry.
Yes. That's okay. Would you be open to sharing your perspective about what happened in our coaching session?
Yes. Well, I I asked Kayla if the question made her realize that other people have different perceptions of rain, for example. And then I said, if you want to go deeper, on this, you could use this as a theme that, and I highlighted a client I had who had abandonment issues. And I said, when you're a 5-year-old, that's very scary. But now you're an adult and you have other resources. And let's think of all the resources you have as an adult to handle that situation. So it all came from the from the theme of rain as being, we always think, oh, that's such bad news and everybody goes along with that. But for some people, rain is really great and we need it. And so there are different perspectives on the same topic.
Thank you, Victoria. Isn't that good coaching to be able to move to identifying resources, that quickly into a coaching session? I'm blown away sometimes at the way that story can just open those things up and just move us towards insights in that coaching relationship with our clients. Anyone else feel that they'd like to share? Erica, I see that hand. Yes, please join us.
Yeah, I was coached by Jay, and what came up for me, even just imagining rain, it brought up the sense of wanting to introvert. I was just talking about, I'm in California now, but I'm not from California. I'm from the Midwest. And I was just saying how much I missed the rain. I missed the feeling of it. I missed the sense of just wanting to cuddle in bed, get a book and read, and just, and then that sense of comfort and also, and what kind of, as we explored more, when he said, what's stopping you from doing that? And it was like, well, because nothing's stopping me, but the fact that I would, me doing that would be something I would be doing myself, as opposed to it's raining, we're all having a collective experience of the rain. So what's missing is that sense of collectivity. Even though there are people who don't want it to rain, we all are going to be impacted. And there's some people who want to be inside. And so just the fact that it was lacking the collective experience of it raining was something that brought up. That was just like, okay, yeah, it was an insight that was powerful. So.
Wow.
Thank you.
Erica, I feel like you were coaching me just then. I was getting a lot out of that. That idea of the collective is so powerful. And I see Jay says in the chat that you really brought your full self and presence into that coaching session. It looks like that was an amazing time. I really like this the way that it looks like that Jay was able to sort of pivot into this idea about asking about this collective, and in the way that it moved. To me, that's the way that we have to work with stories in these coaching sessions. Is we have to retain that flexibility to go where the client's going with the story. So if we have this set idea about what the rain has to mean in the story, it's going to just arrest the session. The session's going to come to a brutal stop. But if we can remain flexible and flow with where the client is going with the rain in the story, that's where we're going to really end up in this deep, juicy place that a lot of meaningful work is going to be happening. So Erica, Jay, thank you for sharing that. That was really, really powerful. I also don't want to skip through, in the chat, I was seeing what some of our other friends here in the group, it looks like that Jeff and Karen and Nicole had a great session as well. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but does anyone from that group want to give voice to anything? Jeff, I see your mic unmuted.
Yeah, so had a great experience with Nicole and Karen in support. What was most powerful was her question asking for me to share what the perspective of my wife would have been in my story. Wow. And I kind of just had to take a breath for a moment to think about that. But actually, my wife would tell the story completely differently. And as a part of that, introduced that my wife would be playful with that. We have a playful relationship. So that was a good perspective taking question that she asked.
Jeff, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, because it really illustrates for all of us the power of shifting the perspective in the story and choosing another quote unquote character in the story to say, how would they tell the story? Because it does cause us to think about it so very differently. And, you know, I think when we put ourselves through that exercise of thinking through how this other person would tell that story, it begins to cause us to think in a more complex way that breaks those cycles and loops that people tend to get caught in when it comes to stories. You know, stories are easy for us to just, we buy into this story that I'm always the victim. The story is always going to be about me being the victim. And when we ask, well, tell us the story from this other person's perspective, when we go through that exercise, it sort of disrupts that narrative, that loop that people get stuck in. And, you know, it's not to say that's a magic bullet fix, you know, for those complex narrative stories people get stuck in, but it's at least a way to start to explore something outside of the client's narrative loop that is coming out of their own mouth. If they have to tell the story through this other person's voice, it sort of forces that situation of introducing a different narrative into this loop, right? Yeah. All right. It looks like Nanord's got her hand raised. Please jump in.
I have a question regarding, you know, the 3 ways to interpret a client's story.
Yeah.
And the first one was listen for who is the hero or protagonist in the story. What is the, like, what's important about that? What am I really listening for?
What a great question. So the protagonist in a story is the person who's trying to accomplish something, but most importantly, the protagonist is inherently the person we're rooting for in the story. So when a client tells a story, identifying the protagonist tells us who the client wants us to root for in the story. And sometimes I've had a number of clients that actually are very perceptive at not placing themselves in a place where it looks like their ego is getting out of hand or anything. And so, but they will often very subtly tell the story where they're still wanting you to root for someone who maybe did something very bad in the story, or they you know are trying to build you know, a sense of sympathy for someone that maybe needs to be challenged in a situation. So that's really the key there to watching for who the protagonist in the story is. Who is the storyteller asking me to root for in this story? And that can often identify some real insights into the storyteller that's telling the story. Great question. Great question. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we only have about 2 minutes left. And I think I want to bring in, I love what Karen has said here. Karen says, what this exercise spawned in me is how important it is to innovate and yes and, which I love, the language of improv, yes and, the stories that clients tell and that we tell ourselves, seeing through the perspective of another, as Nicole asked of Jeff, was very powerful in the moment. Thank you, Jeff and Nicole. And yeah, well said there. It looks like Robin is bringing wine and beer. I don't know if that's for this group, but Robin, we do hope that you will bring wine and beer for all of us in the future. But we I think a good place to end here before I hand the reins back over here to the leadership is just to put a button on this comment that Karen gave us here, that in the moment, when Jeff was challenged to share that, in a sense, it is a positive disruption of what's happening in the session. And as coaches, this is a fine line to walk. It's difficult to do, but finding ways to positively disrupt the session can actually lead to great insights. And that's what we see happening right there. So that's wonderful. Thank you, Jay, for your comment there. I want to hand things back over to our leadership here. And again, thanks to all of you. You all made this session just wonderful together. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm going to stop the recording real quick.